There is a river flowing through the mountains. You can't hear it from the road. You can't see it from the valley, but it's there, carving stone, reshaping the landscape, creating canyons that will exist for millions of years. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask permission. It simply flows, relentless, unstoppable, doing its work in the hidden places where no eyes observe and no voice applauds. You are that river, or at least you could be. But somewhere along the way, we learned to perform our lives rather than live them. We learned to broadcast our intentions before taking a single step. We discovered that the announcement feels almost as good as the achievement, so we stop halfway, satisfied with the appearance of progress, while the real work remains unfinished. This is the great tragedy of our age, a civilization of announcers, not doers, of proclaimers, not builders, of performers, not transformers. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher whose ideas profoundly influenced Stoicism, said something that resonates through the millennia. Nature loves to hide. He observed the world and realized that the most powerful forces operate beneath the surface. Seeds germinate in darkness. Mountains form under invisible pressure. Stars are born in clouds of dust where no light penetrates. Power accumulates in secret before manifesting itself in reality. Consider this. The mightiest tree in the forest spent decades developing roots before its crown touched the sky. The most valuable diamond was formed under unimaginable pressures in the absolute silence of the depths of the earth. The Olympic athlete trained thousands of hours in empty gyms before standing on the podium. But we've built a culture that demands the opposite. Share your journey, post your progress, document every step, let everyone in on your process. And while transparency has its place, while community has value, we confuse visibility with validity. We start to believe that if no one sees us working, the work doesn't count.
The price of constant visibility. Here's what this belief costs you, and the price is higher than you imagine. Your focus fragments into 1,000 pieces, scattered across the minds of everyone you've told. You're no longer working toward a goal, you're managing a narrative. You're no longer building a dream, you're maintaining an image. The difference is subtle but devastating. Your energy, which should be laser-focused on your goal, disperses like light through a prism, beautiful but impotent. Every conversation about what you're doing is energy. You're not spending on actually doing it. Every post is diverted focus. Every explanation is a moment stolen from execution. Your conviction, which should be hardening like steel in a forge, remains soft and malleable, shaped by every opinion that touches it. You start out strong, crystal clear about your path. But then you tell someone, and they raise a doubt, a small question, a well-intentioned concern. And this seed of uncertainty finds fertile ground because its conviction hasn't yet had time to solidify. Epictetus told his students, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." He wasn't teaching mystery. He was teaching that talk is cheap, that words without action are just noise, that the gap between what we say we'll do and what we actually do is where most dreams die. This gap has never been greater than it is today. We live in an age of endless announcement and finite execution. Everyone has a plan. Everyone has a goal. Everyone has a vision they're working toward. But look around. How many people are actually building something real? How many have the discipline to work when the initial excitement fades? How many can persist through the tedious middle, the unglamorous routine, the long stretches where nothing seems to be happening?
Those who succeed are often quiet, not because they're secretive, but because they understand something fundamental about energy and focus. The physics of mental energy. Let me explain this in terms that physics can validate. Imagine your mind as an energy system. You have a finite amount of mental energy available each day. This energy can be directed in two ways: externally, into communication, explanation, and performance, or internally, into execution, learning, and construction. When you announce your goal, you activate neural circuits related to social reward. Your brain releases dopamine, the same dopamine that would be released when you actually achieved the goal. This creates a neurochemical illusion of progress. Your brain, on some level, already senses that you've accomplished something significant. And this diminishes the urgency, the hunger, the absolute need to actually do the work. Studies show that people who announce their goals publicly are less likely to achieve them, not because the universe conspires against them, but because their brain has already received part of the reward that should be reserved for actual achievement.
Silence as a strategic weapon. Those who work in silence know that every conversation about what they're doing is energy not spent on actually doing it, that defending your choices to skeptics is time stolen from proving those choices through action, that the hunger for external validation is a trap that keeps you performing instead of producing. They understand that silence is not just the absence of noise, it is the presence of concentrated power. It is the difference between a river that spreads into 1,000 shallow streams and a river that deepens into a single channel capable of moving mountains. There is a distance that lives in every transformation. On one side is the person you are now, with all your current limitations, habits, and patterns. On the other side is the person you are trying to become, the version of you that has achieved the goal, embodied the discipline, and broken through to the next level. Between these two versions lies distance. Sacred distance. Distance that must be protected. When you announce your transformation too soon, you collapse that distance. You invite the old version of yourself to remain present through the perceptions of others. You allow everyone who knew you as you were to hold you accountable for being that person. Even as you're trying to become someone new, Chrysippus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, taught about what he called assent, the moment when you fully consent to change, not just intellectually, but at the level of action and identity. But here's the thing about assent: it's fragile in its early stages. It needs protection. It needs space to put down deep roots before facing the winds of outside opinion.
Think of the person who has been obese their entire life. They've tried diets before. They've failed before. Everyone knows them as the one who can't stay focused. Then something shifts internally. A real decision is made. Not a wish, not a hope, a decision. And they begin to change, quietly, without fanfare, without announcing it to anyone. In this silence, something powerful happens. They're no longer fighting everyone's memory of who they've always been. They're not defending their new choices to family members who've seen them fail before. They're not managing the skepticism in people's eyes when they order a salad instead of a burger. They're simply becoming someone new, step by step, repetition by repetition, meal by meal, in the private laboratory of their own life. The distance between who they were and who they're becoming remains protected. And in this protection, the transformation accelerates because they're not trying to be two people at once, the old version for everyone else and the new version for themselves. She's simply becoming the new version consistently, without the cognitive dissonance of performing her old identity while constructing the new one. Psychologists call this identity closure. It happens when other people's perceptions of you become so fixed that changing your identity feels like betraying them. Your family knows you as the responsible one, so pursuing a risky dream feels like a disappointment. Your friends know you as the party animal, so getting serious about your goals feels like abandoning the group. Your colleagues know you as the steady worker, so showing ambition feels like breaking an unspoken contract.
Silence breaks this pattern. It gives you permission to change without asking for permission. It allows you to experiment with new versions of yourself without an audience judging whether you're doing it right. It creates breathing space between the expectations others have placed on you and the expectations you're placing on yourself. The neuroscience of mirror neurons, there's neuroscience behind this. Your brain has what researchers call mirror neurons. They fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. But here's the fascinating thing. They also fire based on how others perceive you. When someone sees you as your old self, your brain receives signals that reinforce that old identity. When you're surrounded by people who only know the new you, your brain receives reinforcement for the new identity. This is why geographic moves often accompany major life changes, why people reinvent themselves in new cities, why starting from scratch with people who have no history with you feels so liberating. You're not fighting mirror neurons firing based on outdated perceptions. You're allowing your new identity to solidify without the constant gravitational pull of who you used to be. You don't necessarily need to move cities, but you do need to create distance. And silence is how you create that distance while remaining exactly where you are. You stop arguing about your transformation. You stop defending your new choices. You stop trying to bring everyone along on your journey. You simply work silently and consistently, allowing the distance between the old you and the new you to expand until one day the new you is the only you that exists. And then something magical happens. People wake up one day and realize you've completely changed. But they can't pinpoint exactly when it happened, because it happened in the hidden spaces, in the quiet moments, in the sacred distance you fiercely protected.
There is a law operating in reality that most people never discover. It's not written in textbooks, it's not taught in schools, but it governs outcomes with absolute precision. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't negotiate with your promises. It responds only to one thing: committed action sustained over time. Cleanthes, the second leader of the Stoic school, was a boxer before becoming a philosopher. He understood something about winning that translated perfectly into wisdom. You don't win by announcing your strategy. You win by executing it with such relentless consistency that the outcome becomes inevitable. Cleanthes worked as a water carrier at night to finance his studies during the day, telling no one about his ambitions until he became one of the greatest minds of his era. The universe is always watching what you do, never what you say. It is measuring your conviction by your behavior, not your statements. Every morning you wake up early when you said you would, the universe takes note. Every time you keep working when no one is watching, the universe records it. Every moment you choose discipline over comfort in private, you're casting a vote for the reality you want to create. But here's what happens when you speak instead of act. You send mixed signals. Your words say one thing, your behavior says another. And the universe, which only reads behavior, sees hesitation. It sees uncertainty. It sees someone who hasn't fully committed. And uncommitted energy produces uncommitted results. Think of boiling water. At 99 degrees Celsius, it's just hot water. All that heat, all that energy, but it hasn't transformed. So you add another degree. At 100 degrees Celsius, it becomes steam. It transforms. It can power motors. It can move machines. It can generate electricity.
1 degree of difference creates a completely different state of matter. Your conviction works the same way. When you're talking about your goals, sharing your plans, seeking encouragement and validation, you're operating at 99 degrees. You're hot, you're active, but you haven't transformed. You're still in the same state. But when you become silent, when you channel every ounce of energy into action, when you stop diluting your focus with conversation, you reach that critical temperature. You transform. And transformed energy creates results that lukewarm intention never could. The ancient Stoics had a practice called prohairesis, which roughly translates to moral choice or will. But it meant something deeper than just making decisions. It meant aligning your entire being, thoughts, words, and actions, toward a single purpose. When prohairesis is complete, when all three dimensions are pointing in the same direction, you become unstoppable. But when your words point one way and your actions another, you create internal friction that bleeds your power. Modern physics calls this coherence. When waves are in phase, aligned, moving together, they amplify each other. A laser is just perfectly aligned light waves, and this alignment makes them powerful enough to cut through steel. But normal light, even bright light, is incoherent. The waves spread in all directions, cancelling each other out, producing heat but no cutting power. Your energy is the same. When you're speaking, planning, explaining, announcing, your energy spreads. It goes into conversation, to defend yourself, to manage people's reactions, to maintain the image you've created with your words. But when you're silent and pour it all into action, your energy becomes coherent. It aligns, it amplifies, and it cuts through obstacles that seemed impossible when your energy was scattered.
There's also something the universe does with sustained conviction that borders on the mysterious. Doors open that you didn't know existed. Resources appear that weren't there before. People show up to help at exactly the right moment. Skeptics call it luck or coincidence, but anyone who's experienced it knows it's something else. It's what happens when your commitment becomes so clear, so undeniable, that reality itself seems to reorganize around you. The Stoics would call this living in accordance with nature, or being in harmony with the Logos. They believe that when you align yourself with truth, with virtue, with committed action, you are flowing with the fundamental organizing principle of the universe rather than against it. And when you flow with it rather than against it, life becomes less about forcing and more about allowing. But this only works when your commitment is real. The universe has a perfect detector for false commitment. It's called results. You can fool people with your words. You can even fool yourself temporarily. But you can't fool reality. Reality only counts what you actually do. And it compounds these actions over time according to laws that are completely impartial. When you stop announcing and start executing, when you stop talking about who you're going to become and start being that person in the moments no one sees, when you stop seeking permission and start taking responsibility, something changes in the fabric of your life. Opportunities that seemed closed suddenly open. Obstacles that seemed immovable suddenly move. Resources that seemed scarce suddenly appear. Not because the universe specifically rewards silence, but because silence is often where true conviction lives.
One degree of difference creates a completely different state of matter. Your conviction works the same way. When you're talking about your goals, sharing your plans, seeking encouragement and validation, you're operating at 99 degrees. You're hot, you're active, but you haven't transformed. You're still in the same state. But when you become silent, when you channel every ounce of energy into action, when you stop diluting your focus with conversation, you reach that critical temperature. You transform. And transformed energy creates results that lukewarm intention never could. The ancient Stoics had a practice called prohairesis, which roughly translates to moral choice or will. But it meant something deeper than just making decisions. It meant aligning your entire being, thoughts, words, and actions, toward a single purpose. When prohairesis is complete, when all three dimensions are pointing in the same direction, you become unstoppable. But when your words point one way and your actions another, you create internal friction that bleeds your power. Modern physics calls this coherence. When waves are in phase, aligned, moving together, they amplify each other. A laser is just perfectly aligned light waves, and this alignment makes them powerful enough to cut through steel. But normal light, even bright light, is incoherent. The waves spread in all directions, cancelling each other out, producing heat but no cutting power. Your energy is the same. When you're speaking, planning, explaining, announcing, your energy spreads. It goes into conversation, to defend yourself, to manage people's reactions, to maintain the image you've created with your words. But when you're silent and pour it all into action, your energy becomes coherent. It aligns, it amplifies, and it cuts through obstacles that seemed impossible when your energy was scattered.
You start making choices based on how they'll look rather than how they'll feel. You choose the restaurant that photographs well rather than the one with the best food. You choose the hobby that sounds impressive rather than the one that genuinely calls to you. You shape your opinions to suit your audience rather than discovering what you truly believe. Incrementally, you become a character in a story you're writing for others rather than a human being living your own life. The ancient Stoics were deeply concerned with this very issue, even though they didn't have social media. They called it living by reputation versus living by virtue. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the world, constantly reminded himself in his private journals, "What do you think you're doing? Why do you care what these people think?" He was fighting the natural human tendency to perform for approval rather than act from genuine conviction. But privacy does something equally important. It creates space for failure. Real, messy, embarrassing failure that teaches you things success never could. When you're working publicly, failure is costly. It damages your image. It contradicts your narrative. It makes you look foolish or incompetent. So you avoid it. You play it safe. You stick with what you know works. But in private, failure is just information. It's feedback. It's the universe showing you what needs adjusting. You can fail spectacularly, learn the lesson, adjust your approach, and try again without managing anyone's perception of you.
This is where real growth happens, not in the carefully curated highlights you show the world, but in the private laboratory where you're free to experiment, break things, discover through trial and error. Neuroscientists have discovered that our brains process experiences differently, depending on whether we're being observed. When we know someone is watching, our prefrontal cortex activates more strongly. We become more self-aware, more careful, more deliberate, but we also become less creative, less spontaneous, less capable of the kind of fluid exploration that leads to revolutionary discoveries. Privacy turns off this observer effect. It allows your brain to work the way it evolved to work, without the constant monitoring of how you're being perceived. Ideas flow more freely. Connections form more naturally. You stumble upon insights you'd never reach through carefully observed thought. The Stoics talked about the inner citadel, a fortress of the self that no outside force could breach. But you can't build that citadel in public. You can't develop true self-sufficiency while constantly checking others' reactions. You can't discover your authentic values while performing values you think will gain approval. The inner citadel is built in privacy, in the moments when you are accountable only to yourself. This doesn't mean you never share anything. It doesn't mean you live like a hermit or refuse all connection. It means you maintain a clear boundary between what is private and what is public. It means you protect certain experiences, certain processes, certain parts of yourself from the distorting effect of being transformed into content. Because here's the truth. The moment you share something, you change your relationship to it. The experience becomes a story. The struggle becomes a narrative. The achievement becomes a post. And stories, narratives, and posts are all shaped for an audience. They are edited, framed, interpreted. And in this translation of private experience into public content, something essential is always lost.
What's lost is authenticity. Not the performed authenticity that's so popular now, where people share their real struggles in carefully crafted ways, but real authenticity, the kind that exists only in private, the kind no one sees but you, the kind that forms the foundation of genuine character rather than curated personality. When you reclaim privacy, when you create sacred space that belongs only to you, you give yourself permission to be fully human again. messy, contradictory, growing, failing, learning. Not as content for others to consume, but as a living, breathing person discovering what it means to be alive. There's a phenomenon in physics called accumulated potential. It's what happens when energy builds layer upon layer, pressure upon pressure, force upon force, without release. A river behind a dam, tectonic plates pressing against each other, a seed swelling beneath the ground. For a while, nothing visible happens. No movement, no drama, no evidence that anything meaningful is occurring. Then suddenly, the dam breaks, the earthquake strikes, the sapling breaks, and the accumulated force transforms everything in an instant. His silent work operates on the same principle. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught his students on a painted balcony in Athens. But before that, he spent years studying in silence. He absorbed wisdom from multiple schools of thought. He worked through contradictions. He developed his philosophy in the quiet spaces between teachers, in the private hours of contemplation. When he finally began teaching, his ideas emerged fully formed, powerful, coherent. They changed the world. But this power was built in obscurity.
This isn't theory. This is how extraordinary lives are built. Not through announcements and applause, but through quiet consistency that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. Not through seeking permission, but through creating results that don't need permission. Not through performing transformation, but through actually transforming when no one is watching. The world doesn't need more talkers. It needs more doers. More people who understand that real power whispers while weakness screams. More people who trust the process enough to work without an audience. More people who know that focusing on silence always leads to winning in public. You are capable of becoming that person, not someday. Starting right now, shut your mouth, open your hands, get to work, and let your life become proof that silence, real silence combined with relentless action, is the most powerful force in the universe. Now go build something worthy of the silence that has protected you. Become the river flowing through the mountains, invisible from the road, inaudible from the valley, yet powerful enough to carve canyons that will last for millions of years. Be the silent architect of your own destiny. Prove that real transformation doesn't need witnesses. It only needs you. Committed, focused, relentless, working in the hidden hours where true greatness is forged. Silence awaits you, not as absence but as presence. Not as emptiness but as pure potential. Enter it. Work within it. Transform yourself within it. And when it emerges, let your results speak so loudly that your words become unnecessary. Go to the comments now and write, "Silence is my strategy. Action is my language. I am the silent architect of my future." Subscribe to this channel because we are just beginning this journey of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life.